I always thought my father was a failure because he spent 40 years as a janitor in New York. He came home every night with dust on his hands and a tired smile on his face. My mother used to say that some secrets are too heavy for a simple man to carry. I never understood why we lived in a tiny apartment while he worked in the world's richest bank. He would sit in his old wooden chair and tell me that the greatest wealth is hidden in the heart. I watched him polish his leather boots every morning even though they were falling apart. The smell of cheap tobacco and floor cleaner was the only perfume my father ever wore. I felt a deep shame when my school friends saw him mopping the floors of the big city towers. Then came the night of my 25th birthday when a black limousine blocked our street. A man named Remington stepped out holding a silver briefcase that looked like it belonged to a king. He told me that my father was actually the founder of the entire Wall Street empire. The sound of the rain hitting the roof was the only noise in our quiet kitchen. My father had lived as a servant to protect me from the dangerous enemies of our family. He had watched me grow from the shadows while he mopped the very floors I now owned. The smell of old paper and heavy silence filled the room as I opened the first document. I had only 48 hours to claim my seat before the evil board members took control. I looked at my mother and saw tears of both joy and deep sadness in her tired eyes. She handed me a locket that contained a microchip with the access codes to the main vault. I felt a surge of power and responsibility that I had never felt in my entire life. The transition from a nobody to a billionaire was happening in the blink of an eye. We drove through the glittering lights of Manhattan while the city moved like a river of gold. I felt the expensive leather of the car seat and thought about my father's broken chair at home. Remington told me that a man named Mordecai had been stealing from my family for decades. The taste of adrenaline was strong in my mouth as we approached the massive glass skyscraper. The tall buildings looked like giants guarding a world that I was never allowed to enter. I remembered how my father used to bow his head when the wealthy executives walked past him. The cold night air was biting at my skin, but I felt a fire growing inside my soul. I promised that I would avenge every hour of labor my father spent in these cold hallways. When I walked into the lobby, the security guards laughed because of my old faded jeans. They did not know that the identity of the person standing before them was their new boss. I pulled out the silver briefcase and the head of security suddenly turned pale with fear. The scent of fresh ozone and expensive floor wax reminded me of my father's hard work. I entered the executive elevator and felt my stomach drop as we climbed to the 100th floor. The doors opened to a boardroom where 12 men in dark suits were drinking vintage wine. Mordecai stood at the window looking down at the people like they were tiny little ants. He turned around and his eyes became narrow like a snake when he saw my father's jacket. "You do not belong here, boy," he shouted while throwing a glass of water on the floor. I looked at the mess and thought about how many times my father had cleaned up after him. I did not shout back because I knew that the truth was more powerful than any loud scream. I walked to the table and placed the microchip locket right in front of his greedy hands. Mordecai laughed and told the guards to throw me out of the building like a piece of trash, but Remington stepped forward and showed them the legal documents signed by the bank's president. The air in the room became heavy and cold as the computer screen flashed green with success. Every single bank account and property was now officially under my humble name. The ticking clock on the wall was the only sound as the lawyers scanned the digital code. Mordecai tried to grab the papers, but Remington stepped forward with a very firm warning. I stood tall and told them that the reign of thieves and liars was ending tonight. I could feel the ghost of my father standing right beside me with a proud smile. Mordecai fell back into his leather chair while the reality of his defeat hit him. I looked at him and said that a throne built on lies will always crumble into dust. I ordered the guards to escort him out of the building that he had tried to steal. The feeling of justice was warmer than any blanket on a cold Chicago winter night. I called Elodie and told her to pack her bags because we were moving to a safer life. I promised the employees that the days of fear and greed were finally over for good. The smell of freedom was in the air as I looked out at the New York skyline. My father was a janitor, but he died as the most successful man I ever knew. Now let us review some important English words we learned in this amazing story. The word inheritance means the money or property you receive when someone dies. When someone is betrayed, it means their trust was broken by someone they loved. A legacy is something that a person leaves behind for the next generation to follow. To be anonymous means to do something without letting anyone know your real name. The word sacrifice means giving up something important to help someone else in need. Always remember that integrity is more valuable than all the gold in the world. Thank you for learning with LingoNova and staying until the very end of the tale. Please subscribe and leave a comment about what you would do with a secret empire. We will see you in the next lesson where another mystery is waiting to be solved. Keep practicing your English every day until you reach the stars of your dreams. The journey of 1,000 miles always begins with a single brave step forward.